Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Once a DJ. If you'd like to support the show, then head to onceadj.com/support to find out how you can help. If you'd like to get in touch with any feedback or suggestions, email onceadjpodcast@gmail.com. Once a DJ is produced by the good people at Remote Control. If you'd like to find out more about working with them, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk. Time for the show.
Nice.
So welcome back again to Once a DJ. This is the pilot of the video format. Thanks to Mr. Rob Webster, who's with us. Multi-genre DJ, former resident of one of the UK's biggest club nights, top 10 record producer from when the top 10 mattered, and much more. Rob Webster, a.k.a. Rob Jamweb, a.k.a. Boy Wonder. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
You're welcome, Adam. How are you, mate? I'm good.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm good, thank you. So yeah, let's kick it off. I've actually got a bit of research and some questions to make the editing a bit easier. So I think the first thing to get into is just looking at where your kind of love for music came from.
Okay. Right. Well, I was born into music. I literally had no choice. When I was born, my dad named me after Led Zeppelin. So my name is Robert James, which is named after Robert Plant and Jimmy Page. So from the off, mate, I was literally born into that. My dad was a huge music fan. He was a massive gig goer. The only people he never saw were the Beatles, pretty much, and everyone else he's seen. It was worth seeing in those days. Anyway, so I was surrounded by music all my childhood, and then when I got to the age of 7 in '84, my cousin, who was a few years older than me, he was 14, came round my house one day with an electro tape, the tape called Electro Crucial. And he was saying, "Oh, everyone's dancing to this music. Watch this." He taught me how to body pop. I was 8 years old. He was 13, 14. I had no idea what it was. And we spent the whole weekend dancing in my garden to Electro Crucial. So it was tunes like Hashim, Al Nafish, Tyrone Brunson, The Smurf, Africa Bambaataa, Wild Style, all that. And it just literally grabbed me instantly. Even from that young age, I knew that this was something I really enjoyed. And then within that space of that year, I went to see Beat Street at the cinema with my dad. I went to see Breakdance 2, the movie, with my mum at the cinema. And then I started collecting electro albums, and then it evolved into Public Enemy, Eric B, LL Cool J, Beastie Boys. Then it was De La Soul, NWA, and then, Tribe Called Quest, Gang Starr, and on it went, do you know what I mean? And then at the same time of all of that, I was interested in the acid house thing as well, because pop charts were like Inner City, Big Fun, Derek May, all that kind of stuff was coming out of Chicago and Detroit, and that was in the pop charts. Ride on Time, Black Box, all those kind of pop dance records. And then obviously that was coexisting at the same time as the hip hop movement was. So those two were constantly intertwined, and as I was growing up, and also I was a massive Pet Shop Boys fan as well as a teenager. So it was kind of either the Pet Shop Boys or the Smiths, you know what I mean? And I didn't want to be the Smiths, do you know what I mean? Yeah. So Pet Shop Boys were more electronic, which was more geared to what I did, and that's how it evolved. That's how my musical taste evolved as a teenager. And then when I got to 16, I went to do work experience at BPM Records in Derby, and that was in late '92. And the irony was that my English teacher got me that gig, got me that week experience, because he was friends with Dave, who went BPM. The funny thing was, all my mates ended up doing crappy things like Asda or going to some factory for a week, and I got landed at a record shop, which was just for me, it was just a dream, mate. Yeah. Especially at that era, during the rave era, it was '92. The rave scene was just pettering out, and the club scene was just starting to evolve.
So just at that point, then, your kind of journey through hip hop and things was that with a bunch of mates, or was that solo? Was it you on your own?
It was me pursuing it, because how I would pick up on things was Top of the Pops, and my dad was friends with a guy called Paul Needham, who used to own a pub in town called the Old Nelson, Lord Nelson, which is now, I don't know if I think it's a microbrewery now. You know, on the corner of, it was D's not long ago.
It's becoming a burger joint next.
Right, whatever it is now, but it's originally called the Lord Nelson, and my dad's friend Paul Needham was the landlord of that, and they shared a love of jazz together, and I was a child growing up in the 80s, and Paul used to run a pirate radio station from the roof of the pub, and him and Russell Davison, who later became my boss and mentor on Free Progress, and those guys used to run a pirate radio station up there, and I used to tune into that around 87, 88, and Russell would play, you know, acid ass and early rave and hip hop and whatever. So I'd always tuned into that. I used to tape it, and I was like 10, 11 years old, and I was always looking for music, and my dad used to buy the NME every week for the gig guide. So I would always see in the NME pictures of Public Enemy, the Beastie Boys, LL Cool J, whoever was hot at that time. So it was always about discovering it through older people around me. I didn't pursue it like I was only a kid. Do you know what I mean? But I would just pick up what I could around me. And then obviously used to borrow tapes from mates. When you got to secondary school, you met older kids who had, you know, I was introduced to NWA by school friends, and it was like, you know, gangster rap was a whole new thing, and it was like, wow, you know, having no concept of the meaning of the songs. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You know, like Straight Outta Compton, having no idea what it meant, having no idea what Public Enemy's album meant, but I just fell in love with it. You know, I had no idea of the lyrical concept of it until I was an adult. But as a kid, it was just this rebellious, loud noise. Do you know what I mean? It was just breakbeats and blah blah blah, and it was fun. So it was all through self-exploration, but taken from those around me. You know what I mean? That were in the know, I suppose.
Yeah, because I think that's when you can kind of forge your own path, isn't it? You get this like originality because you're not going through just one lineage for your musical inspiration. So if we just go back then to the work experience.
That was amazing. I did a 5-day run at BPM, and it was in late '92. And I can remember Whitney Houston was number one in the pop charts with "I Will Always Love You." The Bodyguard had just come out, so we used to sell the charts in there. You see, so it was they did everything. It wasn't just an independent retailer. They sold the pop charts. They sold indie, house, hip hop, soul, techno, drum and bass, a lot. So they covered every aspect of independent music, as well as commercial. So, you know, it was amazing experience. And then obviously I went back to school and finished my school year that year. And then in the April of '93, I left school, and basically I wrote to Dave at BPM. I wrote him a letter back in the days when you'd write a letter, you know, and say, remember me from work experience, have you got any jobs? And I rang him up a week later. I'd not heard anything for a week, so I thought, right, I'm just going to walk in and just ask. If he says no, so what? And he said, yeah, Rob, I forgot to reply. Sorry, blah, 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 I've been busy. Yeah, we've got a YTS opening if you want it, which is a YTS, for anyone listening, is a youth training scheme programme, which the Tory government created back in the 80s and early 90s, where you basically, it's like an apprenticeship basically, but you got paid £30 a week and you could claim your bus fare, and that was it. But it didn't matter. I had the job of my dreams, you know what I mean? Yeah. I could have been on a building site or in some horrible sweaty factory, but you know, because the options back then were limited unless you created your own. Same now, I suppose. But so anyway, yeah, I started working for BPM as a youth training scheme apprentice, as a retail apprentice, and instantly, you know, within days, it just they could see my enthusiasm and my love for music. It immediately surrounded me with a lot of older people. Some people my age, some, you know, the customers I'm talking to, like, there would be 18-year-old, 19-year-old bedroom DJs, club DJs. And then there would be the older crowd that came in that were probably in their 30s, that had been around since the 70s and 80s, that were clients, customers. And, you know, so you learnt from them. Do you know what I mean? I started picking up, I learnt about jazz funk through some of the clients like James Brown, Fred Wesley. That stuff started grabbing my soul a bit. And then I started picking up on the older house stuff that I'd missed out on. You know, the Chicago stuff, because I was dealing with reps on the phone, importers on the phone, who would import stuff from America weekly. And I was like, oh, can you get this on DJ International? Can you get this off Trax Records? Yeah, we can get all these pressings. And so, you know, instantly it was Christmas every day, mate. Do you know what I mean?
Did you become a buyer there then?
God, absolutely, yeah. Not straight away. Obviously, I have to learn. This isn't months down the line, but the reps would either come in or ring up. So you would have your mainstream reps like EMI, Parlophone, Sony, Warners, etc. They would come in and give you the chart stuff, pop albums and so on. And then you'd have your independent reps, Network Records, which was, I think it's Neil Rushton, the guy who used to own Network and Alternate and all those rave bands in a city. He had a rep for Network and they sold all the techno in the house and the underground stuff. There was Moe's Music, they sold loads of bootlegs. And then there was the dodgy guys that came round selling bootlegs, white label guys from Liverpool. I'll get into that later if you want. But and then you'd have the independent reps, other labels that were like Amato. You know, the distributors. There's like distributors like Amato, Pinnacle, SRD, they're all probably folded now, but they were independent distributors for little small labels, you know. So they would come in and you would skim through the records, and they'd give you a pile of stock. You'd go through it, 5 of them, 3 of them, 2 of them. They'd go out to the van, bring it in, cash on delivery or put it on the accounts. It was just a community, you know, a self-sufficient community. Dance music was, or club music, any sort of independent music retail, and it was just everybody contributed to the cause. You know what I mean? The guys would make white labels, they would pass them on to the distributor. The distributor would go around the record shops around the Midlands or the North, and that's how things got about. That's how things went viral. You know, that's how tracks went popular. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was Christmas every day. That's the only way I can put it.
Yeah. So we've had a couple of people on where we've talked about certain record shops, and I think to do with when I started buying records, I didn't really experience this because it was mainly maybe it had kind of been and gone. But you had those shops where it was sort of almost intimidated to ask for a certain record. Was that sort of culture there?
No, not at all. Not in BPM. I mean, some people probably felt intimidated because of that kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, that reputation that record shops had. I mean, I myself experienced it. You know, when you go to Select a Disc in Nottingham, they were very much like that. They were kind of gatekeepers.
That's the word.
Whereas no, if I bought 30 copies of the latest white label, I want to sell those 30 copies of the white label. It's not in my interest to keep them under the counter. If there was something that came out that was probably 3 copies came in, I would probably save those first 3 copies for myself, Pete from Progress, or another DJ that we would use that weekend, and then I would order them another 10 the week after. Do you know what I mean? When I could get hold of them again, you know. But no way, it wasn't in our interest to withhold stuff and be kind of, I'm not helping you kind of thing. It was anyone come in. We used to have, back in those days, we'd have, you know, female DJs come in, female bedroom DJs and that starting out, and they would just you know, they would often be more felt intimidated because it was mostly in those days a men's environment. You know, it's completely changed now, which is great, but in those days there was only a handful of women DJs. So now, in those days, anybody that came to the shop, doesn't matter what you are or how old you were or what you were, who you were a customer. If you were buying, we would go, right, have you heard this? Have you tried that? Have you heard this? Because we'd pick up on what they'd bring to the counter. Can I listen to these, please? Yeah, of course you can. You look at them, right, okay, that's deep house or whatever. Have you tried this track? And then you'd pull some more out and assist them. That was the enthusiasm for me, getting people to hear new stuff, do you know? Yeah. Or of going, have you heard this track? And they go, oh, I've heard that in a club. Can I have that as well? And it's a sale, isn't it? That's not sitting on stock, mate. I don't believe that. You know, I never believed that.
So when and where did you start DJing then?
Literally in clubs. The first gig I ever did was in September '93. It was at the Warehouse, which is basically what became Mosh.
So how old would you have been then?
Just turned 17.
How long had you had decks?
Oh, about a year. So prior to that, well, do you know what? Tell the lie. Sorry. In '91, I bought two. I bought 2 MIDI hi-fis, stack hi-fis, right? And I used to just put them next to each other and just play the record and turn the volume up like this because I didn't have a mixer. And obviously they weren't connected. One had its own speakers, the other had its own speakers, and just used to faff around doing that. And also prior to that, I had a twin tape deck, and I used to do tape mixers when I was about 13, 14, and then I would pause a part of a track, like mega mixers, you know, and then record and forward the next bit. It's tape editing, basically, and without realising that was what the word was. And just do pause mixers, I used to call them, pause mixers, and then make a mega mix of a tape and just do that. But proper decks, late 92, early 93, I got my first proper decks, and there was like one was a Panasonic belt drive, and the other was a Technics belt drive, and the pitch was a little wheel at the front. And you could, you know, if you to mix, you have to move the wheel literally like a rotary tiny wheel. It's like a half wheel popping out, and you used to mix them like that. And I had a realistic mixer from Tandy, which cost about 30 quid or something like that. And that was my first setup. And you had to weigh we put a penny on the thing now for scratching. You used to put like 20, 30 pennies on it. You know what I mean, to make it weigh down. So yeah, it was all part of the course, isn't it? You know, and then the first Technics decks I got in late '94. My dad, for me 18th, my dad bought me some Technics. I got 2 Technics 12s for 500 quid. So, I mean, I don't know how much, they're about $1,000 now, aren't they?
Yeah, they seem to hold a value a lot now. So they're kind of back up more expensive than they were when we would have been buying. But I know there was a dip around the sort of digital adoption where I know our good friend Hudson got a couple for, I think it was 300 quid for the pair. But yeah, at the moment, yeah, they're not cheap at all.
Yeah. I mean, these two are replacements because, as I say, I sold my decks in 2009, I think.
Yeah.
I got rid of them eventually. I don't know why I did it actually, but again, but yeah, they were my first decks. But that was my first DJing experience was in late '93. Basically, Russell did this night called Kissing, and it was a Friday night at the same venue that Progress was at. But it was just a mixture of everything, you know, pop, house, R&B, indie, whatever. And I said, Russell, please let me do the first 2 hours. Let me do the first 2 hours, begging him. You know, I was as keen as anything. I was only 17, 16. And he says, right, you can do the first 2 hours and then you can do the lights for me after. I says, yeah, I'll do anything. Just wanted to get my foot in that door, you know what I mean? And I did it and I just loved it. And he just kept me on. And every Friday for about a year, we just did that. And then, but on the Saturday, because I was doing the lights on the Friday, I would go to the club on the Saturday in the summer of '93. And he gradually employed me to do the lights, to be his run around. I did all sorts of little jobs, anything I could to be a part of a club scene, do you know what I mean?
So that first night you were doing, were you kind of multi-genre?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was hip hop, it was R&B, it was a bit of dance pop, you know, whatever was right at that time. I don't know, records like Crystal Waters and Robin S and into bloody, even stuff like The Far Side, you know, or that kind of fun hip hop, you know, Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, that sort of stuff. But yeah, it wasn't a full on, you know, serious club music. That was for Saturday. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So when did Progress start?
Progress started in December '92 at the Warehouse, which is Mosh, obviously. Well, it's not Mosh anymore, is it? But anyway, so it started late '92, and I started going in May '93. So 6 months in, I started going, and by the end of the year, I was DJing for them and playing regularly at there, warming up and doing the Hot Trot one as well. This is a monthly night at Mansfield every month called Hot Trot from October '93 right on through to '95. And I would DJ, we had 2 rooms there, so I would DJ there every month as well in the second room. So yeah, that was how I got my foot in the door. It was kind of, you know, working in the record shop, meeting Russell, developing a relationship with him and Pete, and then working in the club for him, and you know, and it just evolves.
Yeah, we'll get into how big Progress became, but what was it like in those early days? What was it like musically?
Musically, it was extremely experimental. I say experimental, that's a wrong word to use, but extremely diverse. Like, we became so commercial in the end because everything became commercial. By the end of the 90s, it exhausted itself. But 92, 93, 94, 95, those 3 years, we would book, say, for example, Folly Jackmaster Funk one week, Marshall Jefferson the next week, which these guys were icons so at that point, even then. And then the week after, we would have, say, Lisa Loud or Smoking Joe, the 2 female DJs that were running the circuit back in those days. Then we would have Jeremy Healy, who was a big puller. He was the biggest DJ in the country at that time. Then Pete Tong. But then we would have Andy Weatherall. Do you know what I mean? We'd book Andy Weatherall, and he came twice. So we had this 1 week, someone playing real handbag house, hands in the air, and then the week later, Weatherall would come along and do some obscure techno sort of set. But it worked. It just worked. People were a bit more open-minded. Progress was this kind of, at the Warehouse, because it could only get 300 in there. It was this kind of exclusive club at that time. The other clubs you had in the town were Ritz's, Coconut, the commercial places. And the music we played in there was a lot. There was some commercial stuff being played, but it was before it was commercial. You know what I mean? It was the promos of K-Class's latest single, or, you know, it was a lot more underground. Some DJs would play tribal house, you know, Junior Vasquez style stuff, and then other people would play more banging sort of trancey stuff, you know, kind of early trance, kind of progressive melodic trance.
Was it quite an exclusive sort of crowd?
It was a family-based crowd. It was a very family-based. Everybody knew everybody. The core crowd that went, there'd be probably, out of the 300, there'd probably be 150, 200 that were every week. And those would come from Birmingham, Northampton, you know, Stoke. Some people used to come up from London. You know, it would be, people would travel to it. And then there were those that dipped in and then dipped out, didn't like it, you know, whatever. But when you got in there, the atmosphere was so intense, like, good intensity, you know what I mean? And you could just, it was just, the place was just like sardines in a tin. It was mental. People literally would climb into the rafters sometimes, and the walls would sweat. It was amazing. You know, it was an amazing vibe. And there is a video from 1990, early 93.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying Once a DJ. I wanted to create a product for the listeners to be able to support the show and for the guests as a token of gratitude for being on. So I've teamed up with Sure Shot Shop to create some Once a DJ 45 RPM adapter clamps. These are my weapon of choice as a 45 adapter, as they add stability and grip to aid you in any setup. These are available for £25 each plus flat fee postage from onceadj.bigcartel.com. And if you'd like to see the other models you can buy and also customise, check out sureshotshop.com. If you're an avid collector of timeless music on vinyl but don't have the budget to fork out for those pricey originals, then look no further than Be With Records. From library music to yacht rock, jazz, hip hop, disco and beyond, Be With lovingly reissue some of the coolest classics. All of their records are carefully remastered and cut to the highest standards to make sure the pressings are of peak audio quality and do justice to the music being released. And something else to note is that they don't do limited runs to drive up resale and hype. If the demand is there, they'll repress, as the focus is the music, not the profit margin. They have flat rate shipping and free UK shipping on orders over £60. And if you head to bewithrecords.com and use the discount code ONCEADJ, all one word, you'll get 10% off your order. So head to bewithrecords.com and level up those crates today.
Of Russell of Progress being filmed at the warehouse, which came out on a TV show called BPM, which was run by Dave Durrell, and it disappeared off YouTube. I don't know where it's gone, but it just shows you the atmosphere of what it was in those days. But yeah, it was electric.
So from there, you were doing the record shop by day then, and Progress at night, and Russell's other night. Did you just stay with those, or were you trying to push the DJing outside of?
I wasn't trying to push anything. It was coming to me.
Yeah.
Because of the positioning of the shop. Because basically promoters would come in and they'll go, "Oh, I'm putting this night on here. Would you want to play next month?" And I'll go, "Yeah." And I'll go, "Oh, can you put a poster up for us?" And it was kind of like a trade-off, you know, put some posters up, promote the night for us in the shop, give people flyers, and I'd get a gig out of it. Not that that was the intention, but that was just how it evolved. And more promoters came in and you got to know more promoters. And that's where I met John Beckley, and he who I'm still working for, funnily enough, and he would do nights at the club across the road called the Low Club with the Dial. It's not there anymore. And we'd put events on there as well. So at that time in Derby, it was a super club mecca, because you had Progress on the Friargate, you had Shopping, John Beckley's night at the Low Club, the Dial across the road, and behind there you had Renaissance. Renaissance were here for a year and a half, and we thought we were gonna, you know, lose out to Renaissance, but it turned out the opposite way. They ended up losing out to us. But basically, Derby had 3 really good club nights within a quarter of a mile radius of each other, and all 3 were busy. Unheard of these days, you know, to have one club night in anywhere now, you know, that's sustainable. But yeah, it was the work would just come to me based on my position, I suppose, in a sense. Not to say that I wasn't deserving of these gigs or I wasn't good enough. It was just that I was central to the scene at that time. I worked in the record shop. I was on site every day, and that's you know, that's probably one of the main reasons why I grew quickly at a young age.
Yeah. Did that pull you in a specific musical direction then?
No, I was always been an open sort of genre sort of DJ. My sets at Progress would be mostly house, depending on what time I was on. If I was warming up from 9 till 10, I would play garage, US garage mostly. And then if I was doing the 1 till 2 slot or something after the guest, it would be full on harder stuff, you know, big hands in the air tracks. And then at the Hot to Trot gigs in Mansfield on a monthly basis, that would be the downstairs room. So then I would do the hip hop, the scratch DJ, and all the sort of, you know, DMC style stuff with some disco, with some funk. That would be for that room, because it would be in the chill out room there. So the main room was Carl Cox, it was Paul Akenfold, it was John the Please Women, whoever. So we kept it different downstairs, you see. So that would be that. I always had this, and it's the same today. I will always have an open genre sort of. I was like a bar DJ before bar DJs existed.
Yeah.
In the chill out rooms and that, I would do the funk and the hip hop and blah blah blah. But house wise, I would be varied. I would never stick to one thing. I think that's been a bit of a gift and a curse for me, because I've never stuck to one genre. I get so bored. Even now producing music, I will never stick to one genre. I've got to change all the time. Like some producers will develop one sound, which is the ideal thing to do. But for me, I've just got this, I can't sit still. I can't. So I need to. I'm always changing and chopping and changing. So DJ wise, yeah, it's an open book pretty much for me.
Yeah, and I think how much do you just want to keep replicating and replicating? It bears down on a lot of creative people. So your profile was kind of growing as the perception of the DJ was changing. So you were getting pulled along, your trajectory was up, and all of a sudden, were you becoming kind of the limelight and the focal point for people?
As a resident DJ at Progress, yeah, definitely. And then as the mid-90s developed, I started doing regular slots in Leicester, Nottingham, Mansfield, all over. And then I would do these tours. I'd get roped into these tours from Progress. Like we did a Malibu tour. We were sponsored by Malibu to go and do 20 dates across the UK for 3 months or whatever it was. And it was just, so you would end up going off and developing your name out into these other clubs. But most of them were just dives, but, they were just... But that to develop your name in that sense was like a bit different because you were kind of fly by night. You couldn't really develop your name unless you were on the similar circuit over and over again. So, for example, the club scene then, Moneypenny's, Progress, not Gatecrasher, but Renaissance, Stoke, Golden, all those kind of clubs, the Hacienda, all of those would have a similar circuit of DJs play, rotate. So that's how they developed their names. Whereas me, I kind of stayed more regional. Leicester, I got a bit of a name in Leicester for a while, and then Derby and Mansfield. So I didn't really develop. I was more the centre in Derby. Yeah. Than anywhere else because this was my home base. And it was kind of there was so much going on in Derby. I didn't really venture out unless I was pushed out by Progress to do a tour because I didn't need to because the sense of the universe was here. The Progress was getting in 1,000 people a week by this point. Place was going off. Why go anywhere else? Do you know what I mean? But obviously we toured all over. On a Friday night I would go to. God, I've been all over the country DJing, like, as far as, Newcastle way and then all the way down to Southampton. I've been all over, but they were on Progress tours where we would all go together. But that'd be a Friday night, and then we'd come back and then do Progress on the Saturday, and that's where, like I say, the central point was.
So with all this happening when you were quite young, did you manage to keep your ego in check? Because I know, like in Derby, it's a small city. I came down in 2000. And it is somewhere where you'll just walk into people that you know. And I'd imagine people would have treated you as a bit of a big deal at that point.
I don't looking back, we were all arrogant at that point. I was definitely not arrogant in the sense that I thought I was something special. Of course, no, I was just playing records, that was it. But it was kind of like everybody knew my face. That would be it. Yeah. Anybody that would circuit. I used to, where we used to hang around, Sadlergate, Strand, that end of town. People got to know who I was, but they were only people in the same bucket as me. Do you know what I mean? Right. And that was kind of like, and we all knew everyone. I knew all the clothes shop owners. Do you know what I mean? I know who all the regulars were at Progress. I got to know them, or they got to know me. It was, I knew who all the bad eggs were. I knew, who not to cross and who, you know what I mean? You got to know who everyone was. It was one big melting pot of people. But no, God, we all probably at some point in our lives get, a bit cocky, and that's through a lot of it is kind of alcohol related as well, and things like that. But I had a core set of friends in those days, and funnily enough, I've still got a couple of those friends who are still in that core circle. A lot of people have passed through the tapestry of life, but in terms of being an ego and anything like that, no, I didn't seek out the limelight or anything like that. Do you know what I mean? I could easily have done, but no, definitely not. There were some people I worked with that had a massive attitude problem, who I'm not going to name, but still. Anyway, my friends who are watching this will know who I mean. So anyway, yeah, that was it. But yeah, no, not yes and no, I suppose. I suppose when you're 18 and you feel like you're on top of the world, it's like, it's you're floating on a cloud, aren't you? And, yeah. But it was a cloud that was really, that lasted a long time. It was great.
So you mentioned about Russell Davison, and you mentioned that he was a mentor to you. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Russell was 10 years older than me. So by the time I came along in 93, he was 26 and he'd already been putting nights on since the mid-80s. He did one of the country's first acid house nights in '87 at the Blue Note, and he used to DJ with Graham Park, who was a Hacienda DJ, and Terry. Oh, I forgot his name now. The guy that used to be the presenter on the Word Channel 4 TV show. Terry Christian. Terry Christian used to be a DJ at Radio Derby. So him, Russell, and Graham Park used to put nights on at the Blue Note in the 80s. Anyway, so Russell had done all this stuff before I'd even met him, do you know what I mean? And obviously I listened to his pirate radio station in the late 80s. And so anyway, he was just like, he took me on board. He saw in me the raw talent, and he saw the enthusiasm, and he saw that I was playing music way beyond my years. You know, I was playing music from the 70s and stuff. He saw all that, and he kind of just took me under his wing and just made me his, you know, his protege, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know, that's a bit of a pretentious word, isn't it? But, you know, he made me his kind of, he developed me, you know what I mean, in a sense. I mean, he can't DJ for toffee, Russell can't, right? In terms of mixing, right? He rang me up the other night from the Caribbean. He lives in the Caribbean now. And he texted me the other night with a voice message. Rob, I've discovered Pioneer DJ, and it's changed my life. I'm reborn again. I can mix now. And I said, you pressing the sync button, are you, Russ? So anyway, but back in the day, he wasn't about mixing. He was a selector. And he would just put on the right tunes at the end of the night. So he didn't teach me anything, you know, in terms of DJing skills are out. He just knew how to market me and promote me and give me the right gigs. Do you know what I mean? He knew, and he would educate me on music without a doubt. He'd say, have you hit this track, have you hit that, blah blah blah, stuff I'd missed out on. But no, in terms of technical ability, that was all on me. But he knew how to develop me and encourage me. He gave me a massive amount of encouragement, which I lacked in my life. You know, my dad was a massive encouragement on me, but outside of that, I had no influence. There was my dad and Russell, and that was it.
I think you see this, though, time and time again, that you get people that are really good at a certain thing, or even multiple things, but they just don't have the kind of focus to knuckle down, or they might not know how to market themselves, or just do business, deal with people, and then they never fully realise their potential. So, I mean, they are all sort of really important things. So what was next in the ascendancy of progress then from this point?
Well, we were at the warehouse from 92 to New Year's Eve 94. And then what happened is Renaissance moved out of the conservatory, which became Union 1 and Union 2. Do you remember those names?
Yes.
They bulldoze it now. But Renaissance moved out of there in around the same time. So that was a 1,000 capacity venue. So we could double our attendance figures. Yeah. So we jumped ship from the warehouse to the Renaissance as the club scene was growing. This was in 95. All through until the summer of 95, we were flying. We were rammed every week, and then all of a sudden there was a huge bust. Politics got in the way, basically. Bitterness got in the way with certain people, and the club got raided and shut down, and there was a lot of trouble with licensing and stuff. And then, unfortunately, there was a young girl that passed away she attended the club and passed away some hours later at home. So they tried to blame it on the club itself rather than the problem in society. So then we had a few rocky months there, and then we moved to Mansfield, venue 44, for a while, and then after that we moved to the Eclipse on Babington Lane in Derby, which was Ritz's before that, huge corporate European leisure commercial club, which was a big risk because it was all shiny brass staircases, and do you know what I mean? It was like that carpet you get in casinos. It was just naff. But the size was like 1,300 capacity, and it had balconies, and it was a great room. Yeah. But it had just been tacked up over the years because it was Ritz's. But the scene was growing so big at that point. Everything in the pop charts, other than Britpop, was becoming dance music. It became acceptable. You know what I mean? What was once dirty culture and kids raving in fields had become commercially acceptable. So Russell thought, right, we've got to do this. We've got to do it. If it fails, it fails. We did it, and it just immediately just exploded, and that's when it became a super club. And that's when we took out full spread pages in Mixmag and adverts, and Pete Tong was on the same bill as Boy George in one night. It was just massive. Roger Sanchez was in town. Everyone played. And that was 96 to 97 to 98. And in those 2 years, the music started to change. From 96 into 97, Speed Garage exploded. Yeah. And that just became massive throughout the whole of 97. And then after that, after a few months of that, everyone got a bit tired of the speed garage vibe. And then into 98, it was kind of like it was flying still, but it was kind of a bit of a grey area. And then all of a sudden, trance music started to come in. Ferry Corsten and that kind of European hard euphoric trance sound started to develop. And then the audience kind of changed. The earlier crowd kind of were probably starting to having kids now or growing out of it, because 93, 94, you had your 23, 24-year-olds. By the end of the 90s, they were nearly 30. And the whole new generation came along that were probably born in 1980, started to come through, and they were full of gusto. And so the musical landscape started to change for us. And I was still playing warm-up sets at the Clips. I was doing like some garagey stuff at the start of the night, but by the end of the night, it was full-on banging 135, 140 BPM trance. And then we moved from there to Time in Mansfield Road, which was next to Roller World. If you're aware, it's an Indian restaurant now. Yeah. Then that's where it peaked. And then 98 to 2001 we were there. And that whole era was just megala, super club, massive, rammed every week. Ferry Corsten played, all the big trance DJs played, Armin van Buuren played. Everyone that's a massive name now, that are on 30, 40 grand a gig now, played for us then for like 500 quid or whatever. Yeah. So yeah, that's how it evolved. Those kind of time zones, those time periods.
And as well as this kind of boom in progress, you were kind of peaking with your music production, weren't you? So can you just tell us a bit about how you got into the production?
Well, as I say, I've always dreamed of having a studio as a kid. So I've always had samplers, keyboards, drum machines. I've always had loads of bits and bobs. My first studio setup was a Casio SK5 sampler, which was this little tiny keyboard. You could get like 3 seconds of sample time in it, I think. And then a Fostex 4-track tape recorder. I had that, and a Yamaha drum machine, like a kids type drum machine. That was what I had. And then it evolved into buying an a.k.a. sampler, an S950, and then it evolved into getting a Notorious T with that, and then it evolved into a Windows PC. I've moved with every kind of step, but by the end of the 90s I had a PC, a proper Windows PC, and was sampling and learning how to do things properly, and it just evolved. I mean, I've got boxes of demos of stuff that I've never released or never finished, or crap demos that I made when I was 17 that I thought were amazing at the time, and listen to them now I just cringe. But that's the learning of it, and by the end of the decade I hit the jackpot. But people go, oh, you literally made a hit record, and it wasn't just literally, it was 6 years of hard work, 6 years of failure after rejection after rejection. I sent out countless demos to labels, never heard nothing back, got some letters back, oh, it's not for us, it's not theirs. But gradually, I stumbled upon a jackpot. So yeah, that's how that evolved, really.
And what was the song called again? It's just
Everybody, under the name The Boy Wonder, which I do regret using that now. But at the time, basically, the Boy Wonder name was a joke. I was called Boy Chunder amongst the Progress staff, because in 94, I think it was, or 93, 94, I was dead young. Me and Russell had this bet that I could neck an entire can of Red Stripe in one for 20 quid. And he didn't think I could do it. And these were like pint-sized cans. And I said, let's do it. And I went for it. And I necked it all the way back. And I literally polished it off. And as I finished the last gulp, and he saw it going, he didn't want to give me 20 quid. So he picks me up, squeezed me. He's 6.5 foot, Russell is. Picked me up and squeezed me. And I just projectiled all over the dance. The club was empty at this point. It was like 3 a.m. We'd cleared out and was having an after drink. And the entire can just came out on the dance floor. And that was it. Chunder became my name. So it was Boy Chunder for the 90s, and then we got to the end of the 90s, it was, we need a name. So I was coming up with these stupid fancy names like XD5 or whatever, some crappy techno-y sort of name. And we just said, let's call it the Boy Wonder for a laugh, and I thought, all right, fair enough, that'll do. And it just kind of, it worked then, but obviously, I can't call myself that now, do you know what I mean? Man Wonder, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's not a name you could carry on, whereas, say, for example, I don't know, that's the thing with me. I have so many chopping and changing. Do you know what I mean? So, but no, that's how that name evolved anyway, yeah.
And the song contains a replay of Madonna rather than a sample, right?
Yeah, classed as a cover version then. So we replayed it in, and then the original sample in that film, in that song, is from the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, where there's a guy talking about his wife and he's getting really irate. I'm not talking about one thing, I'm talking about everybody. And then I took that bit, everybody, and that's when he says everybody in the track. That's from the movie Cuckoo's Nest. And we thought we'd get away with that, you know. Anyway, sorry about that, Warner Brothers, but we used it. Anyway, so the speech we couldn't use, obviously, because it would have been too much hassle clearing it. So we rewrote it, and then I re-recorded it myself, and I did this rant, and I took snippets of the original speech and put my own words to it, so it was original. Listening to it now, it's not very good. It was kind of a rushed job.
It's catchy.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm on about the speech,
Sorry.
not about the track. The track's fine. It's the speech that I do. We could have done that a lot better. But still, we had to get it done, and yeah, that was insane. That whole period. It was kind of like we got to 1999. I was DJing 4 nights a week. You know.
Were you still at the record shop then?
No, I quit then. I quit BPM in early '97. I went from '93 to '97, and by '97 I was DJing 3 nights a week, and it was starting to affect working in the week because I was out 3 nights. I was in Leicester, Mansfield, Derby, whatever. And I was DJing on Sundays as well. I used to run a Sunday night with a guy called John Slater at Boom Club, which is on Salligate. It's a strip club now. And we used to run a night in there on a Sunday night in there called Delirious, and we ran that from '96 to '02, packed solid every Sunday night without fail. Literally without fail. We get 200 or 300 people in every Sunday night. Unheard of now. So that I would be DJing that night, and that was a really successful night for years. And it just started to, I was getting up for work late, you know what I mean? I wasn't getting on time. So I quit the record shop. But 1999, when that record was produced, it was around this time, it was around May 99. And I made it on my Windows 98 PC, and then I lost it. In those days when you lost your work, you didn't have a backup, you know. So I lost all this work, and then my mate came around, Chris, and I said, I've just made this track where I've just lost it all. It was wicked. I was really into it. We'll make it again then. It took me half an hour to build it back up, and it was like, oh, that's good. So then I took it on a mini disc the following night to Progress and put it on as my last song in my warm-up set. But I didn't mix it. I just played it through the mini disc through the mixer. And Judge Jules was about to go on after me, and he was on Radio 1 at the time. He was a big noise at the time. And he was like, what's this? Get me a copy of this. And Russell was like, pound signs, right, okay. Right, we'll print it up, Rob, let's go in the studio, remake it, let's get it mastered, let's get it fixed up, and we'll print 10 copies off. So we went over to Nottingham, literally, it was just like bang, bang, bang. Went straight to Nottingham to the pressing plant, got Chris King, who ran the pressing plant them days, who recently passed away. Great guy he was. And Chris, can you press us up 10 records, 10 test pressings? Yeah, sure, no problem, blah, blah, blah. So with those 10 test pressings, I kept one, Russell kept one, whatever. We sent one to Pete Tong and one to Judge Jules, and the rest we kept ourselves. Literally a week later, I'm with my mate, it was a Friday night, and we nipped out to the shop in his car, and when it came back, my phone was ringing. I didn't have a mobile then, you know, there was all landlines. My landline was ringing, and I picked it up. So, hello, it was my friend. She went, just heard your song on Radio 1, that track you played. Like, I was, what? Honestly, God, Jules has just played it. I'm like, what? And then an hour later, Pete Tong plays it. Literally, bangs it on, played it off the vinyl. I was like, oh my God. And it was just week after that, it was, everybody wanted a copy, so we went straight back to Nottingham. Another 500 copies, please, Chris. Another 500 copies. Distributed them out. I rang up a few distributors I knew from the record shop days. They banged them out. We were gone. Got any more? They rang me up. Got any more? And before you know it, we sold 3,000 copies on white label within 2 months. So then a bidding war ensued after that with all the labels. And that it literally blew up. Lost just like that. It was incredible. It was like one of those one-off, you know, gambling wins.
So who made the final call on the label then? Was that Russell or you?
It was me and Russell, really. We basically, in some respects, the way things turned out at the time, I wished I'd not signed to the label I did, but that was then. But I'm glad I did now because I'm amongst some pretty legendary names now. But basically, Ministry of Sound wanted it, EMI wanted it, Sony wanted it, a few other dance labels, I can't think of the names now. Manifesto wanted it, which was Judge Jules's. Judge Jules was a scout for Manifesto, right, which was owned by Universal Mercury. So, and we thought, Judge Jules bust this record. He broke it. He spent the whole summer playing it in Ibiza and Creamfields and all that. And he kind of pioneered it for us. So we kind of thought, let's go to Manifesto. They just had a huge hit with Dave Morales, The Face. Josh Wink was on there. all these bands are on there. Let's Get to Manifesto. It's a cooler label, but Ministry we could have gone to Ministry as well. So it was kind of like, don't know about going to Ministry. So anyway, we signed with Manifesto, and but yeah, we just decided because we wanted to keep the family vibe sort of thing. Judge Jules was our regular guest at the club, so we kind of knew him and we kind of developed relationships with him, and it just worked. It worked, and the whole thing did work. And then 6 months later, when we make the follow up, the whole thing came crashing down because of Massive Attack. The band banned me from doing a version of their song,
Right.
and because we covered Unfinished Sympathy with Angie Brown from Bizarre Inc., and the whole thing just fell apart. And I think and that was because I was under pressure to make another hit record, and I didn't. And once I felt the pressure, the fun went straight out the window.
Yeah.
I lost interest in all of it, and massive interest in it. And every day was like going to the factory. It was like, oh, this sucks. So I went off and made a funk album with my mate, and just cut ties with all of it. I says, I'm done with this. I'm not doing it anymore. But yeah, that summer was just pure electric. You know what I mean? That was that.
And just to clarify for listeners then, you got to number 7 in the top 10, which at the time was a pretty big deal.
At the time when I was up against Cliff Richard and Craig David, mate, yeah.
That's nothing to be sniffed, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Number 7 UK charts. He went to number 1 in the club charts, which in them days we had an official club chart before the records came out in the pop charts. So it was Record Mirror, which was Music Week, which was the official kind of promo chart, if you like. So it went straight to number 1 in there, straight to number 1 in Mix Mag, number 1 in DJ Mag, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, number 7 it landed at. Now, that came out at Christmas. So, had it come out in the summer, it would have gone straight to number 1, based on the volumes it sold. But at Christmas, more records sell. So, what they did then, I'm on about records, CDs, and cassettes. So, Cliff Richard was releasing his Millennium Prayer. There's more grannies out there than there are clubbers, do you know what I mean? So, there was no doubt we were going to not get to number 1 against Cliff Richard. But on the midweek chart, where they give you a ballpark figure, I was at number 5, and I thought, bloody hell, wow. But then it landed at 7, and I think at number 8, Ferry Corsten was there with his Adagio for Strings trance track. And then at number 2 was Craig David and the Artful Dodger with Rewind, I think, if I remember rightly. And then I think it was something like Westlife were in the pop charts as well. So, but yeah, you never, at that time of the year, you sell more units, but you don't get to the number 1 spot.
So yeah, I guess if at the time just one of those 3 tracks had been around, then you maybe would have got more sales with one enough for it to go to number 1.
Yeah, definitely. But it was, you see, the thing is, the truth is about the pop charts in the 90s, right? People think politics are corrupt now. Let me tell you, the pop charts were so corrupt in those days. Because when I used to work in the record shop, reps from the major labels, EMI, Warner's, Sony, Polydor, they would come around and give you free records, right? So, for example, they're trying to promote the new band. They would give you 10 copies on 12, 10 copies on cassette, 10 copies on CD single. They would give them you for free. Bang them out at 99p, right? But every day, scan 2 of these through the machine. In those days, before the internet, you had a scanning pen that was directly linked to the phone line, and it went to a machine called Gallup in London, which collected chart data. So every one that was scanned counted as a sale. So that's how these records got the charts by the end of the week. But obviously, the record industry was so corrupt that we would be asked, in order to get the free stock, we scanned a few records through on the side. Not even sold them, just scan them through and put them back on the shelf. And that's how so many records got high up in the charts, you see. But it was a different kind of kettle of fish in the end of at Christmas time, because people bought more records at Christmas as gifts and things like that, you know. Not to say that any of mine weren't corrupt. I'm pretty sure there was plenty that were. But do you know what I mean? Cliff Richard did not get to number 1 on pure merit. Nobody got to number 1 on pure merit. Even records that were destined to sell, like Oasis, you would be scanning them through. The Oasis and Blur, remember the Oasis and Blur battle? Yeah. I remember that specifically because I worked in the shop, and we had EMI ringing us up to scan a couple of Blurs through for us, and then you had Creation and Sony put a few Oasis through. You know, the whole thing's rigged, mate. Everything's rigged. So, but you know, as I say, sales were healthy regardless, and you know, paychecks were healthy as well. Yeah. Not like now, you know.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying Once a DJ. I wanted to create a product for the listeners to be able to support the show, and for the guests as a token of gratitude for being on. So I've teamed up with Sure Shot Shop to create some Once a DJ 45 RPM adapter clamps. These are my weapon of choice as a 45 adapter, as they add stability and grip to aid you in any setup. These are available for £25 each plus flat fee postage from onceadj.bigcartel.com. And if you'd like to see the other models you can buy and also customise, check out sureshotshop.com. If you're an avid collector of timeless music on vinyl but don't have the budget to fork out for those pricey originals, then look no further than Be With Records. From library music to yacht rock, jazz, hip-hop, disco and beyond, Be With lovingly reissue some of the coolest classics. All of their records are carefully remastered and cut to the highest standards to make sure the pressings are of peak audio quality and do justice to the music being released. And something else to note is that they don't do limited runs to drive up resale and hype. If the demand is there, they'll repress, as the focus is the music, not the profit margin. They have flat rate shipping and free UK shipping on orders over £60. And if you head to bewithrecords.com and use the discount code ONCEADJ, all one word, you'll get 10% off your order. So head to bewithrecords.com and level up those crates today. So we're getting to about sort of 2000, 2001. Is that where the kind of club scene started to decline?
The 90s super club era started to petter out without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, I think basically what happened was a generation of kids that grew up in the 80s and 70s and 80s under Thatcher and Tories had grown up under all of that oppression. Not oppression, it's a ridiculous word to use, but grew up under all of that crap. And then when the 90s evolved, the irony was that we were still under a Tory government for many years until 97. So we had all this generation of kids raving and raving throughout the whole of the 90s. Labour take over 97. And then by the end of the decade, the millennium, the clubs became so greedy that the millennium parties, Progress, Money Pennies, they were charging 200 quid to get in or something like £100 a ticket for a normal average club night. DJs were charging $5,000 for a gig when they would normally charge £1,000. Everyone just became bloated and greedy. I think one DJ had a helicopter to fly him to 3 venues across the UK at one night so he could coin in 15k for 3 gigs. Everyone got greedy, and then everyone, the customer at the bottom end, realised that I'd rather stay at home and have a party with my mates, get the deck set up, and that's what a lot of people did. I know a lot of people did that. And so you had a whole generation of people that are kind of been spending all their money on clubbing and going out and fashion and music, and they got to the end of the decade, and a lot of them kind of hit 30, late 20s, 30, and just thought, I've had enough now, I want to take a break and have a family and move on. So when we got over to 2000, 2001, like chill out music became really popular. It's almost like the come down of the 90s, do you know what I mean? Now I look at that in retrospect, you know, people start listening to Dido, for God's sake, you know what I mean? And it's like 07 and you know, bands like Lemon Jelly and that started to come through. It was great music, but if you look at it, if you think about it, everyone got sick and tired of the all the time and they wanted a bit of chill. So chill out music became very popular, very commercial. Moby's album became huge, didn't it? Yeah. All that kind of thing became kind of leveled out the scene. So a generation moved on whilst the generation took over, which was the Gatecrasher kids, and the hard house sort of scene really boomed out at that point. Gatecrasher and Sunday Central and all that sort of stuff, Tidy Tracks, that stuff went full on for a few years. So it kind of like just changed hands. Do you know what I mean? With our generation, I was still doing it without a doubt. I was doing bar gigs, I was doing Progress still on the odd occasion, but that faded in 2002. And then another took over called Blend. But it was all funky house by then. Everything kind of came a bit more funky house. It chilled out a bit. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, that's what happened. 2000, 2001, it was the big come down, I think.
And were you still DJing and doing residencies and stuff?
I was still DJing. I did Progress still, and then I started doing my own nights, a couple of bits and bobs here and there. And then Blend came along, Scott Lorimer. He was a DJ in Derby, good lad. He set a night up called Blend, so I started playing for him regularly. I was also living off royalties, which were quite healthy at that time. And then I set up my own little record label, so I was making money doing that. And I was still doing a few gigs here and there. And I was doing remixes for some labels. So I was kind of still ticking over. And then I got a little job in a record shop, actually, funnily enough, again. I did that for a while. And then my son was born in 2003, and that just changed everything. Because I'd been doing it for 10 years by this point. Yeah. Even though I was only 27. And then I invested a load of money into secondhand vinyl at the time and bought loads of vinyl. And that's when eBay started kind of taking off in the UK. And I set up an eBay shop and I lasted 3 years doing that. So by the time my son was a toddler, the whole thing had passed, you know what I mean? But I was just starting doing bar work then for Russell, Sasumi, little things like that. So I kind of put DJ in the 2000s. DJing for me became a part-time extra cash, do you know what I mean? Bar work, bar gigs, which were fun, but it wasn't the full-on, the hedonism had gone, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think we've discussed this a few times on the podcast. It's a difficult thing, and it's like a bit of a gift in a way if DJing's not your bread and butter, because then you can have a little bit more kind of control over the sort of gigs that you take. Whereas if it's your full-time thing, then sometimes you can just be like, oh, how have I ended up DJing this sort of place?
It's a chore. Oh, mate, I've done so many gigs where I've done it because I've needed the money sometimes. I mean, I've fell on hard times, don't put me wrong. There have been times when I've needed to do the gigs. And I've done gigs where my soul has just completely fell out. You know, I'm just like, oh my God, what am I doing this for? I will never, ever do a bar gig again. Never. I've done so many of them, like 4 or 5 hour sets. And it's like, it's so soul crushing because the last one I did was pre-pandemic, so it was kind of like 2016 to 2018. I had a 2-year run at a bar in town, which was really well paid, but it was just soulless. It was horrible. The clientele were constantly, it was a revolving door, and you end up playing the same track 3 times in the night to keep the current clientele happy. And half the stuff I was playing was just like horrible mechanised rubbish because that's what the management wanted. And it developed. It started off being play what you want, do your thing, soulful ass, funky ass, groovy hip hop. To it's got to be Capital FM. Do you know what I mean? And it was like, and in the end, I was scouring, you know, the internet to find tunes to play weekly that were a good remix of a crappy pop record. And that was my own fault. I could have just walked away, but the money was so tasty at the time. Yeah. I became more bothered about the money than the gig. And I'd vowed then, when I ended that in 2018, I vowed never to do a bar gig again, and I've never have done. I will never touch the bars again. But now, if I do a gig now, it's got to be something that I really enjoy. I don't do many, and the last really good one I did was at the Bunker for Guy Shipley, and you know those guys. No, you know the Bunker is at Vines.
Oh, okay.
And the roof and the loft there, it's like a little boiler room set. It was brilliant.
Oh, nice.
And I did like an acid techno-y sort of breakbeaty kind of disco-y thing there, which was, you know, I mixed acid house with let's say techno. That's a disco-y house that's kind of edgy with acid stuff, and it was a full-on set with the crowd. I was older to be all their dad. Do you know what I mean? They were all like 19, 20-year-old kids. Here's me at 46 banging out these tunes, you know, and they're looking at me like some sort of alien. I'm like, don't worry about that, you know. But yeah, the gigs now have got to be worth doing for me. Do you know what I mean? I don't need the money anymore, so I'm over that. I don't need to worry about, I've got to do this for my image, or I've got to be still out there. It's got to be worth doing for me, because I've had the glory days, I've had all that. I don't need that anymore. I don't seek that anymore. If I do a gig, it's just got to be worth doing. You know what I mean? It's got to be something I can select the music properly without having to think, have I got to satisfy that audience? Have I got to satisfy that audience? When the bar gigs, I've got to please them, I've got to please them, I've got to please them, and it's like, no way.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. You know, there's so many different ways to exist as a DJ. And we talked in particular to Santero, who used to be based in Nottingham, about how he had a Ministry of Sound residency, and then he had to keep all his other kind of bar gigs and things almost secret because that kind of diminished the brand or endangered the brand. So yeah, that is super tricky to manage. But yeah, just going back to your timeline then, Rob. So you kept producing all this time, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I had a couple of spells out. I mean, 2003 when my son was born, I had a full recording studio which I put on hold. I had everything. I had a Fender Rhodes, I had a big desk, the lot. And I moved it all into the home, into the spare bedroom at the home, or the spare living room at the home, where I lived at the time with my son's mum. And I put it on hold for a while because I was running this business. I was selling these records. And then at that time when I started doing little bar work, Sasumi was like a bar gig, but it was a cool bar. And it wasn't like full of idiots coming in drunk and, you know, hen parties and all that crap.
And was that owned by Russell?
Russell owned that, yeah. It was basically, Sasumi means progress in Japanese. So that was Russell's next phase. The club scene, a lot of the club promoters from the 90s ended up opening bars in the early 2000s, you see. That was the next phase, late bars. So that's why a club scene that we had died, because why pay 10, 12 quid to get in a club and dance till 3 a.m. We can go to a late bar and dance to the similar sort of music for free, you know. So it was a no-brainer. So when I started DJing again, after my son was born, 6 months later, I started getting into DJing again for Russell. I would play off CDJ, started using CDJs, and the CDJs came out. There was the silver one that came out. I can't remember which model it was. No, Pioneer. Oh, okay. The Pioneer CDJs that came out early 2000s, there was like they acted like a, you know, the one with the first good wheel on them that you could actually proper scratch with it. It was like they were really cool. And I started putting loads of stuff onto CD, banging loads of CDs together, so I could get 12, 13 tracks on one disc. Why am I carrying 2 bags of records and breaking my neck when I could do this? Why buy £5, £6 record when I can download it off the internet, blah blah, which we all did off LimeWire and all that, Napster and all that in them days. So I started moving into CDJs very, very quickly, and before you know it, I had a little tiny wallet like this with about 2,000 records in my wallet. It was like, come on, this is a no-brainer. I'm looking at my records in my house, and there's cupboards full, there's a garage full, there's just thousands, and I'm just like, do I really need these anymore? This is the way forward. So I started gradually with my eBay business selling second-hand records. I started selling my own off. Massive mistake now, because some of them records are worth hundreds, and I mean hundreds. I sold all my Britpop, all my Oasis stuff that I had all original pressings of. I sold a Smashing Pumpkins album that was worth about 600 quid now for like 100 quid. There's one of 10,000 or something. But all the stuff I'd collected, just as a collector in the 90s, like stuff that wasn't dance related, I sold all that. And then I started selling my house off and my hip-hop, because I thought I'm going to burn it all to CD, and I've still got it. This is before YouTube existed, so it's just when YouTube started. So you weren't unsure that you were going to hear this music again. You know, you didn't realise that Napster was going to become iTunes and all that. So I was selling all my vinyl off. I'm selling it. I'm making good money at the time from it and putting it away and storing it. So I sold everything. And I went pure CDJ. Do you know what I mean? For years, for 10 years at least. I regret it now, obviously, but that's just through nostalgia. But even if I had them records now, I'd be like, why have I still got this? You know, it's until you let something go, you wish you had it. So anyway, I'm building up a massive collection of CDJs, CDRs, and I've got a box in the garage full of all my CDs that I've burnt over the years, and there's just stacks of them, and they're all, half of them are scratched now, you know, because they're only copies, aren't they? Yeah. So they're all knackered, and they've got no nostalgic value whatsoever, whereas my records have. Because you remember buying it, you remember putting it on the sleeve, the artwork, the smell of it. Whereas I've got stacks of CDs in the garage. I'm just like, but I'm not going to bin them in case there's a revival. Yeah. You know, or something, or there's something on there that I've lost, some track that I can't find online, whatever. But from 2003-4, I went CDJ pretty much fully, and that was it. Yeah. So and then around about 10 years ago, I started just buying a couple of records again. I went on Juno one day, and there was a record I wanted. I couldn't find it anywhere on MP3 so I just bought the vinyl, and it felt good again. I was like, oh, I've got a record through post, and then gradually I started buying records again and again. And then when lockdown happened, I just went into complete overdrive, and my postman was coming every day because I was bored at home on Discogs. You know, it was like, what else can you do? And since then, I've not stopped buying records, and I've got decks again. I've bought some Technics again, and I've built up. I've just bought this the other week, the 10 on DJ. I wish I bought that years ago. That's absolutely brilliant. It's got a proper little 7-inch vinyl on, look. Yeah. The slip mat under there and everything. Oh, nice. And it acts like the deck, and it's just a dual layer deck. So it's 2 decks in one. Look, it's got 2 outputs. So you've got deck A and deck B. So it's 2 CDJs in one. Oh, nice. It's absolutely brilliant. So that's given me a massive boost at the minute. So that now has got me thinking, don't want to stop buying records more. I've gone around in a circle again. I've just bought a batch of records yesterday, and I bought a batch of records last week, and I keep buying, but this thing is going to stop me from spending so much money on vinyl. I'm going to start going on TrackSource a lot more and downloading, you know, some WAVs again.
And you've had some quite successful digital releases as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I've had I've been involved in 4 number ones over the last 10 years online. I've had a number one in the 90s in the dance charts with everybody. I had a number one remix in 2002 with the Rhythm Masters on Radio 1's Pete Tong's Essential Selection, whatever it was, the Essential Countdown. And then I had a number one in 2015 with a track called Bionic Love, which is like a disco edit I did. That was number one in Juno. And then in 2021, I had a number one on an album that was part of this album that went straight to number one in Juno as well. So I've had a number one in each of the last 4 decades, if you like, 90s, 2000s, 2010s and the 20s.
So you are like Cliff Richard a bit.
The Millennium Prayer, mate. All the way through, mate. So the Millennium Bug. So yeah, I've been involved in some form of number one, no matter how minor they might be to some people. The Juno chart means nothing to anyone other than the disco DJs. But nevertheless, it's, you know, I'm still involved. Yeah. I'm still doing it, do you know what I mean? And that's the thing. And that's why I still invest in equipment and, you know, I love it, you know, I love it, you know.
And you're offering mentoring for DJs, aren't you?
Not so much DJs, producers. I don't do DJ mentoring. I do production mentoring. So basically my business, waxodus.com, I teach people online one-on-one production. So if someone will come to me, they want to make disco house, they don't know where to start, or they know where to start, but they don't know how to finish tracks, or they want to learn to play chords, or they don't know how to put the right sounds together. So they hear a track by XYZ artist. How does he make that? Let me show you. And then I teach them and build their confidence up like that, and then I get them to be releasing records. I've set people up that have gone from zero to having their record label. Yeah. And I've set other people up that just want to learn how to do edits, or they want to learn how to remix, or they want to learn how to just play the keys or whatever. I teach the whole 9 yards, yeah. It's mostly, though, it's got to be disco house, funky house, deep house, lo-fi, some hip-hop beats, I suppose. Not hip-hop itself, not rapping, but the beat side of things, production side of things. But yeah, all that kind of thing. Keyboards, pianos, that's what I do, yeah, with that, yeah. I love it. I love doing that. It's great. It's hard work sometimes, but you know, like any job, innit? It gets a slog at some point. DJing was a slog when it was a passion, and then you go through waves. But at the moment, I'm enjoying it. I'm doing YouTube videos regularly. I've got a good little community around me. I've got people that are coming forward and emailing me saying, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be releasing music. Your videos have helped me, and that's nice to get. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's great. And also, I'm just trying to put together an album at the minute of unsigned artists on my label, because I've got my record label as well. And I'm trying to get a group of people to release their music that wouldn't dare normally come forward. I'm trying to bring out. I'm emailing people privately and that I've taught in the past, and that let me release one of your tracks, because I want to get people to, you know, to believe that you can release your music, you know, and because so many people will fear releasing tracks. I know people that will make tracks, they've got loads stacked away, but they will never release them.
And the barrier to entry is so low for releasing.
Of course it is. It is. It's massively. I mean, there is so much crap out there. I mean, there's 120,000 songs a day come out on Spotify or on the internet in general, roughly. And to even for me, I mean, I don't push myself massively because I've got so many things going on. I don't push my own musical releases as much as I should. If I focus solely on that, I would. But I don't. I like to dip into all sorts of areas, but the barrier for releasing is easy. I mean, I've put blog posts out and videos out showing people how to set their own record label up in 10 easy steps. You don't need any money. You just need time. You just need to, you know, you can get your music distributed like that. It's so easy now. And there is no, I mean, before the internet, you know, the gatekeepers were your record labels, EMI, and if you wanted to do it independently, which you could, you pressed up 1,000 white labels and distribute them around record shops. Anybody could do that, and a lot of people did, but obviously it still cost £500 to £1,000 back in those days to release a white label, up to or from, you know, and now it's zero. So the software's free. You can download a digital workstation for free. You can download plugins for free. You can use samples. You can sample packs, whatever. You can make a track in minutes. You can do it on your phone, as you know. Yeah. So now there are so many people doing it, but I'm trying to. So many people will still fear doing it. You know, I'm worried about what he's going to say or what. I've released records that I'm shambles. I'm looking at them and go, God, why did I do that? The bass line's too low on that. This is rubbish on that. That sounds right. I'm my own worst critic. I'll listen to something I released 10 years ago. Oh my God, get it, pull it. But I don't. I just leave it. Just whatever. It's lost in the mire now. You know what I mean? It's lost in the
It's the same with DJing though as well. Like people just worry about taking that first step, thinking, "Oh, I can't mix," or "I'm not good enough," or "I've not done 8 years," or whatever. And like none of that stuff should like put you off going out really, because it's ultimately just get yourself out there, experience that buzz.
Yeah, exactly. It's like like you say. I mean, I enjoy doing. Sometimes I do TikTok lives and stuff, videos and that. But I just enjoy DJing at home. Now I'm doing little videos online, and it still gives me a buzz. Do you know what I mean? But I'm not actively seeking going out and doing gigs every week. I don't need to. I don't want to. But when the odd gig comes up, I'll go and do it gladly. Do you know what I mean? And when I do it, I'll put all my effort into it. You know what I mean? But people that are terrified of, I don't want to go out and DJ. I'll do it at a mate's birthday party or something. But that's it. It's like, well, then that's all you ever will do. You've got to step out of your comfort zone. And I mean, I'm terrible for sitting in my comfort zone. Do you know what I mean? If I spent time, I could really turn that turntable inside out and do some really crazy stuff. But I'm happy just doing the bare minimum on it, the basics, what I can do on it. But yeah, people need to step out of the comfort zone. But I mean, I stepped out of my comfort zone years ago, and I've done everything I needed to do. In that sense. Nowadays, I mean, there's some brilliant DJs out there. Musically, it's not my kind of thing. But have you seen James Hype DJ?
No.
He's obviously a banging commercial house DJ, but what he does on the the Pioneer CDJs, he's incredible. He has about 4 on the go, and he's like, it's brilliant. And he stepped out his comfort zone. He stands out, is what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think a really kind of important life lesson as well is to be prepared to step out of your comfort zone. I mean, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I'm quite a part-timer at it, and I'm not great, if I'm honest, but I've done a couple of competitions and I've just found it the most nerve-wracking thing to do. But once you've done it, win, lose or draw, you come away and you've got that buzz and that satisfaction that you've done it. And it's the same with DJing, particularly if you're doing battling or the first few times you play out, your hands are absolutely shaking trying to get the needle on. And it's so kind of character building and so good for you. And like, I guess that if you've kind of done that in the 90s, gone out your comfort zone and been in front of everyone, then now you've not got to prove yourself to anyone anymore.
No, I mean, funny enough though, about 8 years ago, I finished a music degree. I started one 10 years ago because I wanted to become a teacher. And anyway, at the end of the music degree, it was a popular music production degree. We had to do a live performance at the Playhouse in Derby. And it's on the internet somewhere still, the video. And we did this funk sort of band, me and a couple of lads. Bearing in mind, I'm old enough to be the lads' dads on the degree. I was playing keyboards, and it was a live audience. There's probably 150 people there. And I was on stage under the spotlight, and I was playing keyboards. And we did a cover version of No Diggity, Blackstreet. We funked it up. And honestly, I'm dripping with sweat, mate. Honestly, and I've stood in front of thousands of people DJing over the years. I've played countless parties and whatever, but performing a keyboard on stage for the first time in years. I've only ever performed live in a keyboard probably 3 or 4 times in my life, in bands. One was an acoustic band, which was chilled out, so that was all right. But I was like sweating. But if I'd have stuck to that, it's just sticking to it. Do it every week, once a week, whatever. You get over it. It becomes normal, doesn't it? But I know what you mean. Once I hit that first chord, I was sweating. Don't do anything clever. Don't do anything clever in my head. Just play the generic stuff. Within a couple of minutes, I got over it and just.
Yeah, it's just getting that adrenaline dump out the way, really, isn't it? Just mindful of time. Do you think there's anything that we've not covered?
Not at the minute, really, mate. No, as I say, all I'm doing at the minute is just getting back into. I've set up my arrangement on my start. As you can see, I've got a live rig there. I've got an acid machine there, 303. I've got a sampler behind that, which you can't see. I've got the Roland keyboard, which is a 4-track sequencer, which is all synced to that. And then I've got this Denon CD deck that I've bought here, which is absolutely amazing, and my vinyl deck. So I'm making a hybrid. I'm putting all this together to do some new sets, some live sets online. I want to try and get some sort of recognition on there and do that and get people to see me doing that, so that I can probably get some more work out, doing that. If I'm going to go out and DJ again, I want to do that. I want to take that with me. I want to do something new rather than go out and DJing, which I will do, but take a rig with me and live jam on top of DJing. That's my next thing.
Something that sets you apart, isn't it?
It's like Carl Cox has just started performing live techno sets with all his equipment. He's kind of given up just DJing. He's bought all the equipment to the table and his drum machines and his synths and that. I want to do that now, you know, for myself. I don't need to just DJ. I want to add another string to the bow now. Do you know what I mean? So that's my next phase, really. I suppose is live hybrid DJ performance. That's my next thing, mate.
That's great. I think it never fully disappears, does it?
No. Oh, mate, I tell you, I've had months where I've hated it, and I've looked at records and my things. I'm not touching you again. I don't want anything to do with it. I'm done with clubs. I'm done with DJing. I'm done with this. Done with music. Yeah, we all go through it, and then you gravitate back to it. It's like a magnet. You just can't stop. It's a force. It's within. It's either within. I know people that have been bedroom DJs or they've tried DJing, have done a bit of it, and they've walked away, and they've now got secure jobs, and they're done with it. You know. Whereas for me, music is just, it's in my blood. I can't help, like a spider that spins his web, mate. I just don't know what else to do. You just gotta keep gravitating towards it no matter what. Yeah. And music is the only constants in my life. I've had, you know, all through my life, music is the only thing that's ever given me full on true comfort, you know, in dark periods or whatever, you know. And that's what it is. I think I could happily sit with my records on my own for hours on end and be happy doing that. Yeah. When I was a teenager, I was happy listening to my records in my bedroom, my 7 inches and my tapes, and taping radio stations on my own, even though I used to be out with my mates all the time as well. When I got home at night, I'd go off into my own little world and make little tape covers and just all that stuff you do as a teenager, you know what I mean? And yeah, music is the only constant, and it will always be there until I breathe my last breath, mate.
Amazing. Just one last question then before we go. Is there any one particular person you'd like to see on this podcast? And if so, why?
I think you should get Atjazz on this podcast because he's an absolute legend. He's a local legend. He's got so many releases under his belt, so many accolades. He's massively revered. He's the top of his tree. He's a good friend of mine. We go way back. I think he would be very good.
Rob Webster, thanks very much for your time and best of luck with everything.
You're welcome, Adam. Thank you for having me, mate. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Once a DJ. If you'd like to support the show, then head to onceadj.com/support to find out how you can help. If you'd like to get in touch with any feedback or suggestions, email onceadjpodcast@gmail.com. Once a DJ is produced by the good people at Remote Control. If you'd like to find out more about working with them, head to remote-ctrl.co.uk.
That was nice.